Hello, my name is Laureen Sims. It's been quite some time since I posted a vlog related to the 3 R's. Some of you may be wondering what the 3 R's mean. In my first vlog, I did explain the meaning of the 3 R's, but I'll go ahead and share a short explanation on each. Revisit is where you bring a topic back into discussion. Rethink means where you further analyze a topic. Re-educate is where you consider different perspectives and clarify the points of a topic. Those are the 3 R's. And before I move forward, I want to share how the 3 R's relate to the topic today. But I want to share a quote with you that was written by Martin Luther King Jr. That's one of my favorite quotes. It has significantly impacted me. The meaning of the quote and the point is that a person's life cannot move forward if they become complacent or silent about the injustices that are being done. The topic today of whether the president at Gallaudet should be hearing or deaf, as well as discrimination, are sensitive and sticky topics, but we cannot be silent about them. We can't base our decision on a person's demographic background, such as their race, gender, whether they're hearing or deaf, because that constitutes discrimination. Let's discuss qualifications. We need to identify who wrote and designed them and to know the meaning, but I know it's a challenge. I think it's important to find a person that's qualified for a position and match that with the position's responsibilities. Deaf people of color experience inequality and oppression every day. It can be compared to the term called the glass ceiling. Here is a picture. Deaf people of color experience oppression, and even if they are qualified for a position, they still are behind and experience prejudice and racism and oppression. It also can be described as the unseen power system, which is a systematic issue that continues to arise. Again, I want to discuss the important question of whether the president at Gallaudet University should be hearing or deaf. But I want to share that it is my personal own opinion and thoughts on the matter. I want to share with you the twofold concept of rethinking. I want to take and how it can apply to taking Howard University as a model and applying that to the decision and how it impacts the deaf community. Gallaudet University and Howard University are both located in Washington, D.C., in very close proximity to each other. Here is a photo of Howard University. Gallaudet University was established in 1864, and then 3 years later, Howard University was established in 1867. They're both federally funded, and Congress authorized both as well. President Lincoln authorized Gallaudet University, whereas Howard University was authorized by President Andrew Johnson. I want to discuss the Civil War era. Here's a photo. The Civil War began in 1861 and concluded in 1865. Gallaudet University was established in 1864, right before the war ended, and Howard University was established right after the war in 1867. I want to look at the status of the education of Black people and their lives during the Civil War era. Slavery had been endured for 400 years, and if a Black person was caught reading and writing, they were killed. It's very disheartening. I know education for Black people was not up to par during that time. However, Howard University continued the trend of Black people attending. I want to discuss the history and comparisons of Howard University and Gallaudet universities and the presidents that were at both universities. The first president at Howard University was white. I'll show you a picture. Howard University continued to have white presidents, and then they finally hired a Black president. This is a picture of the last white president. For 59 years, white presidents ran Howard University. However, the first Black president was hired, and here's a photo of him. It's fascinating that there were many white presidents, and then the first Black president had very light skin. Did you notice that in the photo? It's very interesting. Now, at Gallaudet University, the first president was hearing, and then the first deaf president was became deaf at age 21, but identified as hearing. So it's interesting to see the society and systems back then of the Howard University president being light-skinned and the first deaf president identifying it as hearing. It's very interesting. After the first Black president at Howard University, that trend continued. And still today, they have a Black president. Here's a picture of him. So for 59 years, white presidents ran Howard University. And then the first Black president was hired, and that continued. Gallaudet University hired hearing presidents, and the first one was named Edward Minor Gallaudet. That president ran the university and continued to hire hearing presidents for 125 years. Until the deaf president now riot happened, and then the first deaf president was hired. But 125 years continued to go by before that happened, whereas in Howard University, it was only 59 years until they hired their first Black president. So it's been a short time, only 27 years since Gallaudet University has had deaf presidents. Gallaudet University is still in its beginning stages of providing quality to the people and not discriminating against. Again, I know this topic is sticky and sensitive, but we must discuss it because Gallaudet University is still in its beginning stages and has a lot of work to do. And I need to see Howard University as a model, and Howard University needs to lead by their example, and Gallaudet University needs the support and to follow that lead. Many laws have occurred at Howard University. Students are graduating becoming actors and doctors and lawyers. How Howard University has just progressed immensely. Racism does still exist, of course, but people are working really hard to decrease racism and discrimination, and it's really working effectively at Howard University. So that's how I showed rethinking and how it related to using Howard University as a model, and how the decision of the president being hearing or deaf affects the deaf community. And now I'll share more about that. The twofold concept of rethinking, and considering the second part, which is how the decision of the hearing or deaf president affects and impacts the deaf community, has two parts below it as well. The first part is related to deaf education, and the second one entails ASL. Let's discuss deaf education first. Deaf education in America has progressed. However, deaf schools are decreasing and mainstream schools are increasing. And it is still shown that deaf education and students that are deaf have report cards that show unsatisfactory results and scores. Again, this is my opinion. But like I said, deaf schools are decreasing while mainstream schools are increasing in America. And it's important to find interpreters that attend interpreting programs and are certified for the position that they hold. Here is a short clip of an interpreter in a school. That may be a challenge for the interpreter to be compared their certifications and their schooling being compared to the general education teacher and their qualifications. It's not equal and it's unbalanced, and it does provide challenges for interpreters. Many students are entering into mainstream schools, the students that are deaf, and it really hinders their future. It's important for the system to change, and so the future of deaf students can be successful. They need that support. This topic highly impacts people of color that are deaf as well. Here's a photo that shows that deaf students of color are increasing as compared to white deaf students. It's increasing at a significant rate, and deaf education needs to be a focus for the future for these students. the future can be hindered as far as education and academics for students of color that are deaf, and they can continue to experience the glass ceiling feeling and oppression and racism and discrimination that occurs in school. That's a challenge for deaf people of color. Again, that's why it's important that we really consider the factors of whether President at Gallaudet should be hearing or deaf. And that way they can be an example and it can show that the deaf community has an impact on the world. Here's a quote that I want to share with you. Now, talking about the second factor of ASL. This is a chart showing what ASL enrollment looks like currently today. Many hearing people are continuing to enroll and take ASL classes. It's developing and being a common trend in universities today. As compared to the schools of the deaf for deaf students and hard of hearing students, they don't offer many ASL classes. They don't have that mentorship or support on increasing their ASL skills and abilities. It really limits their education and future. It's important for deaf students to develop and learn to become teachers and practice those skills without further developing their ASL skills and understanding and comprehension. Now I want to discuss the genre of the different categories of art, including music, literature, stories, poetry, and so forth. I want to discuss that genre and how it has impacted the hearing community and the deaf community. The hearing community has taken their experiences in the past generations and have created these different stories, artworks, music, poetry, etc. So they take these from their own personal backgrounds and create those. That's all part of the hearing identity. However, ASL is different. Here's some short clips on ASL. As you can see, deaf people and people of color are constantly borrowing those stories and experiences from the hearing community and the hearing world. Again, the deaf community and people of color and many other communities such as Hispanic or African American, Japanese sign language, all these different forms of language and culture have borrowed the hearing white community stories, books, and different types of poetry and music. Their own personal experiences and generational stories have a very small portion of the overall borrowing of the hearing community and the hearing world stories. Again, the deaf community is just starting to develop and progress in their own culture, and this will just show more examples of that. Again, other languages follow the same experience. The Japanese, the Hispanic Sign Language. It's not just American Sign Language, as many different sign languages have the same trend of borrowing the hearing community stories and those experiences in their generational culture. Because, like I said, Gallaudet University has only been ran by deaf presidents for 27 years. We have a lot of work to do. But the population of the hearing community and white community is much larger than the deaf community. There's only about 300 million deaf people in America. Here's another quote I wanted to share with you. I believe even though the deaf community and people of minority are small in numbers, they can have a significant impact on the world. It's all about getting people aware of it and having access to that information through social media, different types of awareness and accessibility is huge, and relaying that messages and becoming more powerful in the small numbers. Again, the topic today of the important question of whether the president at Gallaudet should be hearing or deaf can be highly impacted by taking Howard University as that model, as that goal of becoming more like them, and showing how that decision of whether the president should be hearing or deaf can highly impact the deaf community and how they can progress in their future. I know the deaf community is small at Gallaudet in regards to the president only being deaf for the last 27 years, but they need the support and to advocate for themselves, and so they can grow and be more like Howard University. Children of color are powerful, and if we raise them to become powerful people and to understand that they have that, it can really change their future. Now, in discussing the third R of re-educate, that concept has three terms below it as well. Being homegrown and is the first concept. Having mentoring programs is the second concept. And the third factor is being an ally to each other. I want to explain how homegrown is a factor into the Howard University and what that means. Howard University worked really hard to get to where they are today, and that happened internally. So that's what it means to be homegrown. They also use mentoring programs, and people of color and people that were white were friends and supported each other and advocating for each other. And that's how it became so successful. Because Gallaudet University only started hiring deaf presidents 27 years ago, they are still building that foundation and becoming strong supporters and advocates for each other. And so they can grow and progress in their university. So, as far as being homegrown, they have a foundation, but they still have a lot of work to do. Mentorship needs to happen to support each other at Gallaudet University. Hearing people and deaf people need to become allies and support each other to find that progression of being successful at Gallaudet University. I want to share my experience on the three factors of being homegrown, mentorship, and being an ally. I did attend a deaf school growing up, so I learned a lot about internal homegrown support and progression. I've had fabulous mentorships and friends that were deaf and helped me to grow and become the person I am. I've had amazing friends that are white that I love dearly. I've had a great experience in these three things. I know people at Gallaudet are wanting a president to show that mentorship and ally and homegrown. They want it so bad, and they just need to keep moving forward and support each other and making that dream become a possibility. Again, it's so important that they support each other, advocate for each other, and be unified as one so they can continue to hire deaf presidents for the future and so on. This is just the beginning, just the start.